Hey everybody, it is Wednesday, August 20th. You are watching or listening to the Mo News Podcast. Remember, we are on YouTube. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to, Jill, on this National Bacon Lovers Day, August 20th. I wonder how many of our listeners knew that this morning.
I don't think many, but it is a day to highlight how bacon continues to shape menus, drive demand, and inspire creativity across kitchens and brands, Moshe.
You can bake with bacon, you can cook with bacon, you can sprinkle bacon, you can shake and bake. So there's a lot of opportunity there, everybody. But for those of you not watching, Jill's in studio today, everybody.
Whoop, whoop.
Look at you come to New York City, the big city.
The Big Apple. I'm here.
How was the ride in?
It's great. Every time I take the train, I think I should do this more. I enjoy it.
Well, it's interesting because we reported last week that in-office numbers are now at pre-COVID levels in New York, so officially back to 2019 levels, but the train not too packed. There were seats.
Well, I have the luxury of coming in off-peak.
Right,
as it's
you
called.
didn't have to be part of the rush hour.
So I'm not part of rush hour traffic, but I do think the city feels really full.
Yeah.
And now add one more.
Well, it's good to have you in our Industrious studio. For those of you unfamiliar, you haven't heard the ads. That is our home here, Industrious. We actually have put they got some logo edge right behind you, right behind me, over here. Industrious is an elevated shared office experience for those of you looking for just a meeting room for a day, some space to just get out of the house, or office space. They have office spaces in the U.S., around the world, several hundred locations. So check it out. We have a special deal going on with Industrious to check it out for just a meeting or for a day in the office. And maybe you'll want to, well, if you pick a certain location in New York City, you'll see us in the halls.
2 words, guys. Free coffee.
Free coffee, free morning
Snacks.
and free afternoon snack. And they always change it up here. So check it out over at mo.news/industrious. INDUSTRIOUS. Industrious.
Okay, now to the headlines. The Texas legislature is back in session, and the Republicans in the state are set to pass that controversial new congressional map. They want to gain 5 more congressional seats ahead of the midterms.
You can call it the Texas effect. More states, both Republican and Democrat, blue and red, now triggered by Texas here and looking to redistrict, what it means for voters across the country.
In D.C., the mayor has consistently said a federal takeover of the police department is unnecessary because crime is way down. But now the Justice Department is investigating the D.C. police over alleged fake crime data. Yeah,
this is something we told you about with the initial takeover, and now things are being taken to a new level.
The latest on the war in Ukraine, President Trump says President Putin has agreed to meet President Zelensky. But what does Russia say?
And one of the unexpected reasons we learned yesterday as to why Trump wants to make peace around the world, it has to do with a higher power, Jill.
We'll leave it there.
And what they may say at the pearly gates.
In Bolivia, the presidential vote is headed for a first-ever runoff between the centrist and right-wing candidates, what it says about the country's socialist policies.
Yeah, the socialists are down there after 20 years, and it's a trend we're seeing across South America.
In tech news, ChatGPT is getting more personal. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman talks ChatGPT 6, what we know about it.
And it comes as just GPT-5 was released last week.
And if you're wondering why Taylor Swift and Bruce Springsteen tickets were so expensive or so hard to come by, there is a new FTC lawsuit against one ticket reseller. And which Florida neighborhood has dethroned California's Beverly Hills as America's priciest community?
Yeah, there's a new zip code to memorize beyond 90210.
And Moshe is on this day in history. All right, the latest Texas House special session begins today, where a controversial plan to redraw congressional maps is at the top of the agenda, and it is setting off a national domino effect, leading multiple blue and red states to redraw their own maps as the two parties battle for control of the U.S. House next year. As we reported, more than 50 state Democrats had fled Texas for 2 weeks to deny the GOP-controlled legislature a quorum. President Trump has been pushing Texas to redraw the congressional maps in the state in order to gain 5 more Republican seats in Congress. Fast forward, State Representative Nicole What in the hell? Now I could see what you're doing during. Now I can.
Jill's like, I'm getting through the story right now, and I see what Moshe does while I go through my portion of the podcast, which is go through Instagram.
I had suspicions that he wasn't always listening to everything I said.
I try to multitask.
So fast forward, State Representative Nicole Collier, she is a Democrat from Fort Worth, said that she was actually locked inside of the House chamber overnight on Monday, and that's because she refused to comply with a new Republican rule that requires Democratic members to be escorted by state police. She was later allowed to return to her office. Republicans, though, say the escorts are necessary to prevent further quorum breaks, but Collier says this rule is an infringement on her rights and dignity.
For those of you asking about this, the majority party in Texas does have the authority to figure out ways to stop quorum breaks. So literally over this week, once Democrats came back, they're like, you are going to be assigned a police officer who's going to make sure you don't leave the state this time. She took a stand there, and she also filed a lawsuit here in the past 48 hours saying that, well, their process here goes too far.
But Moshe, for anyone listening to this and thinking, well, this won't really affect you if you're not in Texas, this is a story that has major national implications because it could help determine control of Congress. And call it the Texas effect. The redistricting effort there has sparked a domino effect of other states now looking to redraw their maps mid-decade. So that is a break from the usual once-a-decade redistricting, which typically follows the release of U.S. Census data.
Yeah, going back to the beginning of the Republic, we have a census, and every year that ends in zero. 1810, 1820, 1830, 2000, 2020. And that was the most recent one. And so typically, traditionally, states then, based on population changes over the last 10 years, redraw their districts. Now, over the last 200 years, one way they do that is called gerrymandering. It's a term for basically redrawing those districts to benefit the party in charge. We have seen that for going back to basically the beginning of the Republic in the 1820s, effectively. And over time, the Supreme Court has effectively given it an okay, saying, well, this appears to be constitutional. It may not be great for our democracy, but it appears to be constitutional. Now, what we're seeing with this Texas law is this effort to, well, we're not going to wait every 10 years. We're going to do this every couple of years. So this has now set off a renewed effort in a number of states. Trump has been pushing Texas hard here, saying, I want to see these redrawn. We have a close midterm election this year, and I believe this is fair. This gerrymandering is fair. From his perspective, will Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and a number of blue state governors say, well, no, this is not fair, and we were going to do this, but if Texas is going to do this, we're not going to just sit on our hands here and allow Texas to add GOP seats. So as we told you, California is looking at adding 5 Democratic seats. Now, they have to go through a whole referenda because they have an independent commission in California that does that. They don't just use the legislature like they do in Texas. And so they got to get that passed in the fall, and then they can go ahead and redraw the lines in California. But it doesn't stop there. You've got New York and Illinois on the Democratic side, Maryland also on the Democratic side, that are looking at adding more seats on their end. Then you have other Republican control seats. The White House putting a lot of pressure on Indiana right now. There's only 2 Democrats left in Indiana. Will they be drawn out? Well, the White House is pushing Indiana Republicans to do that. Florida with Ron DeSantis, another red state. Ohio, another red state. Missouri, another red state, also exploring redistricting options. So this is a huge domino effect here. It does appear that Texas will go through with this despite the national implications. Republicans, again, hold a very slim majority in the U.S. House, and Democrats want to flip the House. So Republicans want to make that much more difficult, and Trump leading this effort. And Jill, when we looked at the numbers, we did a deep dive on our Substack yesterday. For those of you who aren't aware, the Mo newsletter is over on Substack if you have the Substack app. And it's amazing, and it's out every afternoon. If you listen to the podcast in the morning when it comes out, and you're following Instagram all day, well, you can get the newsletter in the afternoon. Or if that just seems like a lot of news for all of you, you could just listen to us, take a break throughout the day, and then check out the Substack every afternoon. Now, we broke down some of the states, and just to give you a sense of where we're already at, like California, for example, has 52 districts, 43 of them Democrats, 9 Republicans. That's where they're looking to add 5 Democratic districts. And so ultimately, you'll be in a situation there where if Texas does its thing, then California says it'll reply. 48 of the 52 districts in California will be Democratic. That's close to 90% there, in a state where Trump won nearly 40% of the vote. So 90% Democrat in a 60% Democratic state. Well, it shows you representation, right? And you see this state by state. On the Republican side, for example, Missouri is a state where there's 6 Republicans, 2 Democrats. That's 75% of the House seats represented by Republicans in a state where Trump won 60% of the vote. So you see where this is going more and more. Now, remember, this is not a sure thing. Each state has its own rules, but Texas really is touching off something here. We've always seen gerrymandering. We've seen this political redrawing. It has never been good for this democracy, but things are about to go to a new level potentially.
Right. So if the new maps are passed, state courts could potentially intervene to stop the partisan gerrymandering that actually happened in New York back in 2022. But the big picture here is that there are some very clear losers when it comes to gerrymandered maps. Things like, I don't know, fair representation, competitive elections, and American democracy.
Yeah, at the
to
end
name
of
a few.
Yeah, just some small things. And that's the thing is like we've already been heading in this direction. I mean, remember, there's 435 U.S. House seats. Of them, we typically track about 40 of them that are competitive, which means about 400 of them are no longer competitive because they've been redrawn to be so red or so blue. Well, those 40 competitive districts, those are members of Congress who need to compromise with the other side. And as those numbers dwindle, even when I remember covering the U.S. House elections back in 04, 06, we were tracking almost 70 seats. Now we're at 40 seats. With this redrawing, we could be down to like 20-ish seats. And that's an issue because that means that, well, A, if you're a Democrat in Texas or a Republican in California, well, you have less representation. And you have a already partisan and polarized Congress that is even less prone to compromise because these people don't need to compromise because they're in very safe seats. And so that's one thing to keep in mind here as we're watching all of this. And one of the reasons we will be tracking this story very closely.
Right. So I'm in a district that is one of the purple districts, as you
mentioned. One
mentioned.
of the 40.
Yes, there's not that many of them left. And I don't think it is a coincidence that the congressperson who represents my district is Tom Suozzi. Now, he happens to be a Democrat, but he is considered a moderate Democrat, and he actually is part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, whose goal is to reach across the aisle and work on a bipartisan level with other lawmakers to, as the name says, problem solve and come up with common sense solutions. So whatever you may think of Tom Suozzi, not really the point. But it does show that because he's in a purple district, he knows that he has to appeal to Republicans and Democrats. And so that is, in a way, what is lost when you do this redistricting.
Jill, we should note your previous congressman was George Santos. So it's not always the rule that if you represent a purple district that you're willing to work across the aisle. You might be George Santos in some moments, but for the most part, I think the rule follows.
So, Moshe, I don't think that Republicans recognized that the seat was purple, that they had a shot of winning it. And that's because Democrats, actually Tom Suozzi, had held that seat for a while, and he had decided to give up the seat and potentially run for governor. And so there was this open race. But because Republicans didn't really think they had a shot, they didn't do the proper vetting of one George, or any vetting,
yes.
of one George Santos. And the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history, and he's in jail right now. Yeah.
But I like that, Moshe, you will continue to hold that against
Jill,
me.
forevermore, anytime you mention your congressional district, there will be a Santos mention.
All right, staying in Washington, D.C., we're now about a week into President Trump's takeover of the city's police department, with hundreds of National Guard troops also in the city. The White House has claimed a number of wins in just the first few days, while D.C. authorities are saying that violent crime was already on its way down in the last 18 months. But now one of the battles is over statistics. The Trump administration directing the Justice Department this week to investigate whether Washington, D.C. police manipulated data to make crime rates appear lower. U.S. Attorney for D.C. Jeanine Pirro's office will reportedly be running the investigation. So D.C.'s mayor, Muriel Bowser, has been pointing to those D.C. police stats, arguing that crime is way down in the city and that there is no need for the federal takeover. For example, she says violent crime down 26% compared to last year and lower than before the pandemic during President Trump's first term. But the head of the D.C. Police Union told the local NBC station in D.C. that while he thinks there's a possibility that crime has come down, it is not down by nearly the amount shown in the data. He has called it preposterous. And he has previously talked about how the data gets manipulated, saying that police officers or the members of the union will respond to the scene of, for example, a felony offense. And then inevitably there will be a captain that will show up on the scene and direct the member to take a report for a lesser offense. So instead of taking a report for a shooting or a carjacking, they'll order the officer to take a report for a theft or an injured person to the hospital. So that would be a lesser charge, and that would make the numbers seem better than they actually are.
This all comes as there's a local report that an MPD commander was suspended and put on leave in May after the department began investigating him for allegedly altering crime data, though that commander has denied the allegations. This investigation will go much further, looking at other police officers, other city officials here for wrongdoing. It's unclear at this point what the charges would be, what the crime is here, faking crime numbers, whether that's actual crime or not. But ultimately, this is something Trump is closely watching here. And he's been touting it. He's been all week, even as he's been talking to Zelensky and other people, he's like, I went out to dinner the other night. Everyone I know is going out to dinner again. Though it does come as there's some open table numbers that reservations are slightly down in D.C. Over the last week. So we'll wait on that data, Jill. But we should also note here that D.C. is not alone here. There are investigations in a number of cities across America related to the manipulation of crime data. It's a tale as old as time, to quote Beauty and the Beast in a different context. Manipulating crime, beauty and the fake violent crime data. Ultimately, you win plaudits from as a city official when crime is down, and you might be kicked out of office when crime is up. And so if you can change the numbers by just a little bit, that might change something. And so we will watch this investigation to see how this impacts the reality on the ground there.
All right, time for the speed read, starting with the latest on the war in Ukraine. From the Mo News Substack, President Trump said Tuesday that the U.S. will not be sending ground troops as part of security guarantees for Ukraine as he works to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. He said in a Fox News interview that European leaders are, quote, willing to put people on the ground since the war is at their doorstep, while the U.S. would primarily provide air support. He noted that NATO troops would not be part of the deal, although some of those NATO member countries could provide their own assistance to Ukraine. Putin has said NATO troops in Ukraine is basically a non-starter. Now, Trump's Tuesday morning interview followed Monday's White House meeting with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, as well as European and NATO leaders. As for why Trump is trying so hard to get both sides to stop fighting, he joked that he has a higher goal with this effort, so to speak.
If I can save 7,000 people a week from being killed, I think that's I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons.
Some people suspected he was going for a Nobel Peace Prize, but heaven, I guess, is
well, he is going for a Nobel Peace Prize. He's going for a Nobel Peace Prize. He's going for bragging rights, and apparently heaven as well, based on what he told Fox and Friends yesterday. I mean, obviously, it seems slightly in jest as he said it. But as Belinda Carlisle once said, heaven is a place on earth. And so that's effectively what he's trying to create here. The White House, citing several conflicts, he's been touting multiple times in recent days, I solved 6 conflicts in my first 6 months. Now he's saying it's actually 7 of them. Which conflicts are they talking about? Well, they're talking Iran and Israel, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, Cambodia and Thailand, India and Pakistan, Serbia and Kosovo, Egypt and Ethiopia, and Armenia and Azerbaijan. Some of those you may have heard about, some of those you may have not heard about, and some of those, well, there actually is not a deal yet, but in some of those he has made progress with his diplomacy. There's no deal yet between Egypt and Ethiopia. It's also not clear that Serbia and Kosovo were actually going to war, though Kosovo authorities do give Trump some credit there. In the Pakistan-India conflict, Pakistan said Trump was key. They've actually nominated him for a Nobel Prize. India was like, actually, we don't believe Trump had much to do with this at all. So it really depends on the conflict you're talking about. But on the whole here, Trump does have a number of diplomatic achievements that he can point to. And that's a bit of what he's referring to when you may have seen recently in various social media posts and interviews where he keeps talking about 6 conflicts in 6 months. So he's made this a major priority. Obviously, Russia-Ukraine, much more challenging, though Trump keeps saying in his media appearances, I thought this was going to be the easiest one, which is interesting to say because like this is actually, it involves Vladimir Putin and, you know, the bloodiest war that we've seen in the past 3 years. And yet Trump is like, all right, it turned out to be much harder than I thought. And on top of that, Jill, despite the meeting with Putin on Friday, despite the meeting with Zelensky on Monday, Russia launched massive strikes on Ukraine in the past 48 hours, nearly 300 drones, 10 missiles striking just hours after Trump's meeting with Zelensky. So Putin not letting up here, even if he's talking the talk, certainly not walking the walk. Trump's still hopeful here that a direct Ukraine-Russia meeting may come soon. He even said yesterday that Zelensky and Putin are getting along a little better than I thought. But like, there's been like no conversation, like to our knowledge, no phone call or handshake or golf match. So we will wait for clarity as to what he meant there when he says they're getting along better, because we will add that Russian officials haven't sounded very hopeful in recent days. State media basically ignoring the Zelensky meeting and talking about how any contacts between top officials should be prepared very carefully. So very circumspect and cautious from official Russian media channels, despite the optimism that we've heard in recent days.
If you do want to read the tea leaves a little, though, one thing that we do see in conflicts around the world is that as a ceasefire is nearing, they do tend to ramp up military attacks.
Getting in their like last joust, and as far as the Russians or Ukrainians are concerned, getting that last inch of territory before things get frozen.
Right, putting maybe a little bit more pressure on getting a deal. Maybe they think they'll get a better deal. And as you said, just sort of getting in their last attacks. But we'll see. I mean, as President Trump has said, there's no deal until there's a deal. From the Mo News Instagram account, Bolivia's socialist era has come to an end. For the first time in 2 decades, voters rejected the Socialist Party that was once led by Evo Morales and advanced a centrist and conservative candidate into a runoff. Morales rose to power in 2006, promising greater state control and an anti-U.S. foreign policy. He became a global leftist icon, declaring, quote, "Capitalism is the worst enemy of humanity." But after years of deepening fuel shortages, soaring inflation, and political fractures within his movement, Bolivians have turned away.
Yeah, this is a trend we're seeing across Latin America right now. Just to give you a sense of the state of Bolivia right now, there are people enduring such fuel shortages, they're sleeping in their cars overnight in gas lines. Inflation surged over the summer to 24%, long lines for subsidized food, like even bread in the country. And Morales came to power. I mean, there was a time where you saw Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. You saw Morales in Bolivia, these acolytes inspired by their mentor, Castro. In Cuba, you also saw Rafael Correa in Ecuador, destroying their economies. It's probably no surprise the 2 poorest countries in South America today, Venezuela and Bolivia. So clearly they've had it in Bolivia, and they were actually able to have a fair election there, whereas in Venezuela, the voters have been trying to get the socialists out, but Maduro, the heir apparent to Chavez there, not allowing any sort of fair elections. It's a story we've covered before. And so this hasn't worked, and ultimately in Bolivia, on the in that initial election over the weekend, the Socialist Party candidate drew just 3% of the vote. As for Morales, he was banned from running again. He's actually in his home region right now, avoiding charges that he raped a 15-year-old in separate legal issues. He denies those charges, but ultimately the socialist experiment that we saw across parts of Latin America, well, it's coming to an end in a number of those countries. I mentioned Bolivia. We've also seen the rise of Javier Milei in Argentina, the rise of Noboa in Ecuador, and we're also seeing right-leaning challengers trying to capitalize on frustration in both Chile and Colombia as well.
And ironically, as we're seeing a decline in Latin America, we're seeing more interest in the United States, as New York has
at least here in New York City.
Right, you have a self-proclaimed socialist candidate, Zoran Mamdani, running in the financial capital of the country.
And you also see the popularity of politicians like AOC and Bernie Sanders, at least in recent months, as progressives in the Democratic Party are saying that the centrist Democrats, the traditional Democrats, are not fairly representing them.
Some tech news now from CNBC. ChatGPT-5 just launched, but ChatGPT-6 is apparently already on the way. That is the message that OpenAI CEO Sam Altman delivered to reporters in San Francisco, offering a rare glimpse into the company's evolving product roadmap. Altman did not give a release date for his company's next AI model, But he made clear that it will be different and arrive faster than previous versions. ChatGPT 5 had a pretty rocky rollout. Users have been taking to social media to complain about the model being colder, less connected, and less helpful than the prior version. One change in the newest model, it won't just respond to users, but it will adapt to them and let people create chatbots that mirror personal tastes. Altman says he sees memory as the key for making ChatGPT truly personal, meaning that it will remember who you are, your preferences, routines, and quirks, and adapt accordingly. Moshe, you asked me this already.
Well, that's the problem with GPT is that you feel like you're having a new conversation every time, similar to Google, right? So memory is helpful. You're often saying, GPT, don't give me this again. But GPT doesn't keep your memory in there unless you attach some sort of external software or a system to your AI, which certainly if you're at a big company, they do. But if you're just a random user of AI like ChatGPT, it doesn't remember anything. Because remember, it takes a lot of storage, a lot of memory, a lot of data to just do basic functionality, not even with personalized memory.
Right. Altman saying people want memory. They want product features that require ChatGPT to understand them.
Yeah, so Altman went on here in this interview saying, I think our product should have a fairly center-of-the-road middle stance, but then you should be able to push it pretty far. If you're like, I want you to be super woke, it should be super woke. If I want you to be super conservative, it should reflect that as well. And so that's a bit of what we're looking at. Jill, you mentioned that he wants this to come out quicker than the time difference between 4 and 5. Just to note, 4 came out in the spring of 2023. 5 just came out this month, so just over 2 years there. So he'd be looking at a less than 2-year time frame for GPT-6. We should add that Altman has acknowledged that the rollout of GPT-5 has been mishandled. They're quietly pushing a tone update that's much warmer, he says, for the people who feel it's cold. In the interest of good journalism here, one of our resident AI experts, our podcast producer, Arian, actually asked GPT-5, hey, what do you make of the bad reviews, GPT-5? So we asked AI, and GPT-5 said, listen, it gave us a bunch of reasons. 5 saying there were high expectations unmet by incremental gains, my loss of personality. I appreciate the transparency there from GPT-5.
I'm not funny anymore.
Yeah, like there's an emotional impact for all of you. I've made some factual mistakes. I've gotten too corporate. So, GPT-5, for all of its faults, at least open with its issues.
Self-reflective. I appreciate it. From CBS News, a federal effort to go after ticket resellers allegedly gouging consumers. A Maryland ticket broker accused of illegally purchasing and then reselling hundreds of thousands of tickets for profit, including thousands to Taylor Swift's Eras Tour and Bruce Springsteen's recent concert tour. The FTC is suing Key Investment Group, saying the company made millions of dollars in profit from reselling the tickets at inflated prices. That lawsuit was filed Monday in Maryland. It accuses the company and its affiliates of bypassing Ticketmaster's security measures, which are designed to block resellers from violating ticket purchase limits. Key Investment Group also did business under other names like Epic Seats, TotalTickets.com, and TotalTix. That's according to the complaint. The FTC alleges that in a 1-year period, the group purchased about 380,000 tickets from Ticketmaster at a cost of about $57 million, and then allegedly resold those tickets on secondary marketplaces for about $64 million. In a statement, Key Investment Group said that it's going to vigorously defend itself against what they are calling a clear example of regulatory overreach. And they actually say the government's case threatens to dismantle the secondary ticket market for live events.
We should note here, the profits are not huge, but certainly the FTC trying to set an example here. For example, when it comes to Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, between March and August of 2023, Key Investment Group allegedly purchased 10 or more tickets to 38 different Taylor Swift shows. So that was just under 2,300 tickets, and they made a profit of about $1.2 million reselling those tickets. Now, apparently for one Taylor Swift show, they used 49 different accounts to buy 273 tickets, even though the tour had a 6-ticket purchase limit per customer. So, 273 is much larger than 6, breaking the rules there. There's also a Bruce Springsteen show in Jersey back in 2023 that they're being accused of some funny business on. In that case, there was a 4-ticket limit. They purchased 1,500 tickets. They're accused of using thousands of credit card numbers, virtual card numbers, spoofing IP addresses, a whole bunch of strategies here. So this could set a precedent here, and that's always been a huge frustration for many people, which is, I can't get to the original tickets, and then once I go to the resellers, like these guys, they have hiked up the prices.
And finally, from Business Insider.
There's your clue.
Beverly Hills, no longer the poshest zip code in the United States. That title now belongs to Gables Estates in Coral Gables, Florida, which is now the most expensive neighborhood in the U.S., even beating out Beverly Hills 90210. That is according to a new ranking from the real estate website Zillow. Gables Estates is a gated community near Miami. It has a typical home value of about $21 million. The waterfront neighborhood has 24/7 land and sea security, yachts, and features mansions that average over 56,000 square feet in size.
I have to say 33133, it has a ring to it, but not like 90210, right?
It's actually a mouthful. 3313. Wait, what is it?
Yeah, so Gables Estates has several zip codes, including 33133, 33134, 33143, 33144. Anyway, apparently there's several zip codes that belong to Gables Estates here.
Say that 5 times.
33133. Yeah. Anyway, this is based on one way Zillow looks at the data. I'm sure you can go through Zillow's back end, but apparently you do have to pay a high price to various things, including applying to live in the community requires a $100,000 non-refundable application fee to the Gable Estates Club. So think about that, $100,000 non-refundable application. You got to be pretty certain you're going to get in there. The top 10 most expensive neighborhoods on this list, based on Zillow, are all either in Florida or California, but in the case here, Florida has surpassed California, at least at the top of the list, the first few spots there before we get to Beverly Hills. If you're wondering about the other side of the equation, the least expensive neighborhood in the U.S., Bullard Hill in Jackson, Mississippi. The average home value there, $24,000. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin in 1741. A Danish explorer named Vitus Bering, who was working for the Russian government at that time, encounters Alaska on this day in 1741. The Russians would control Alaska for just over 120 years before they sell it to the United States in the 1860s for just about $7 million back in 1860s money. Today, inflation adjusted, that's $152 million. But still, I think the U.S. got a pretty good deal there for Alaska in modern day dollars for $150 million. On this day in 1896, the dial telephone was patented. On this day in 1989, Lyle and Eric Menendez would murder their parents, Jose and Kitty, in the famous speaking of Beverly Hills, in the family's Beverly Hills mansion, becoming a media sensation. Several decades later, they've been in prison for, a while now, since the early 90s. And a judge just took a look at their case, is allowing them to potentially get parole here. And Jill, this week, the Menendez brothers, both Eric and Lyle, will be making their case for parole on Thursday and Friday, respectively. So look out for news there as for whether Eric and Lyle will be getting out of prison after more than 3 decades. On this day in 1998, President Clinton authorized cruise missile strikes in Afghanistan against bin Laden's al-Qaeda network, as well as an attack in Sudan. This came in the aftermath just days after the bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, killing more than 200 people, including 12 Americans. Despite the fact that al-Qaeda had declared war on America in February of 98, would go on to do those twin bombings in August of 98, that was the only attempt pre-9/11 to really militarily target al-Qaeda before they would go on to another bombing in 2000 of the USS Cole, a major naval ship, and then 9/11 following in 2001. We end here with a bit of TV history on this day, Jill. We'll begin by celebrating the 36th birthday of Saved by the Bell, premiered on this day, August 20th, 1989.
So the Saved by the Bell logo or whatever it was recently on our streaming homepage. So my husband and I were trying to figure out how old Mr. Belding was when the show started.
Dennis Haskins.
because we wanted to be really depressed at how old we thought he was. So he was actually older than I thought. I thought he was going to be like 29. Any guesses?
Oh, on the show?
In real life.
As in when he played the principal.
Correct.
On Saved by the Bell in the early 90s, you believed him to be in his late 20s, early 30s, which would then make him 36 years later in his like late 60s. Jill, I am going to offer, I think Dennis Haskins is just shy of 80 years old. Where am I?
So he was actually 39 when the show started, which means that he was in his 40s for most of the show, which feels appropriate.
Right.
I was just nervous he was going to be like in his 20s, and I would have just felt even worse about myself.
Jill, for the record, the actor who played Mr. Belding, Dennis Haskins, 74 years old today.
Which again feels appropriate.
I think the scarier thing is when you look up like how old Mark Paul Gosselaar is. Zach Morris. Zach Morris today is 51.
But Mario Lopez, who played AC Slater, still
doesn't look a day
20.
over 18. Yeah. Mario Lopez, that man doesn't age.
When I wake up in the morning. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Review us in the App Store.
And thanks for listening to this podcast, and thank you for your attention to this matter.
Sincerely, JRW. And what's your middle name?
MDO.
An MDO.
And you listen to more than the app.